Good morning, everybody. That was I just popped out from behind the furniture. As you can see, building a piece of furniture in a small workshop, it has its limitations. So I've rearranged things a little bit so that we can get through what we have to do today. So as you can see, I've shifted the tables a little bit, and yeah, anyway, we'll go through that. So what we're going to do today is we're going to work on the top panel. Okay, so that's going to be pretty similar to our boxes where we've got frame and panel lid. So we're going to make a top that looks a little bit like that. Now we're going to do a fair bit of work on that. And one of the things that we're going to happen with that is that we're going to put a little inlay around the frame, on the inside of the frame. So I'll show you how that goes in a second. Before I do that, I just want to show you what we've done with the feet. So as you can see in the photo that was on the in the beginning, there was a gap between the foot plinth and the cabinet itself. Now what we did there is we lifted it up to give a little bit of space around it, just to make it look a little bit different. Quite often you see a cabinet where you've got the feet looking like that, attached to the cabinet itself, or it's part of the cabinet build. Well, we've done a little bit differently, so you know, just a bit of variety, I suppose. So our cabinet, and I'm going to shift the cabinet and just show you what we've done with the feet, and we'll go through some processing with that. So what I've done, I'll just go over to Pammy on the camera. So what I've done, when we built the feet, I joined the feet together and I cut 4 sliding dovetails, and then I cut these little panels, little feet, or rails you might say, to fit inside those. Okay, now they'll get glued in place. I'm not going to push it all the way down because it's quite snug. Put it around the right way. I'll just let it sit up like that. Now that'll get pushed down, and you can see on the edges of it, got a little curve on the end of it. And once that becomes, when we get that down flush, what you'll find is that we'll sit the cabinet on top, and it'll sit on the top of these 2 rails. And you can see that I've got little, what look like domino holes in the rail. Now we're going to attach the feet to the cabinet with buttons. Rather than putting heaps and heaps of screws through, we're going to make some little buttons. Those little buttons look like this. So that's the button. If you look on the other side, it's countersunk. So what will happen is that will pop into here. Nice and tight. That little button, I've got 5 of them. There's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. There's one there, and one on this side, as I've done with here. 1 here this side, and 2 on that side. And that's where I put the screws up. That'll allow a little movement in the cabinet so that it doesn't exactly lock it all together and restrict what happens during change of humidity. So they're our little buttons. Now they're square, admittedly. We could rearrange them, we could shape them, we could do lots of different things to them, but for the moment they're just square because I've just made them really, and they're going to actually hold the cabinet in place and the feet. So we'll go through that. Once we get to the stage where we're going to fit it all together, I'll give a bit more of an explanation on how to make these and how to fit all this sort of stuff together. So well, let's get that aside. Again, like I said, small workshop, limited space. Now, this is what we're going to look at today. This is our cabinet top. I don't have a piece of material that's wide enough. I've got plenty long enough, but I've got very little wide enough to actually give me a center panel. So what I have to do is I have to join something together. Now we're going to have the join going down through the middle here, like that, and I'm going to show you how I go about that. Now around the outside edge, you can see how it's dark on this drawing. We're going to have a 5mm, or it may be 5, maybe a bit more, white piece of material separating the inside to the frame. That will be the same colour as the buttons or the keys, the butterfly keys that we're going to put in the corners, and it will be mitre together, of course. So we're going to go through that process. So what we'll do today is we'll join those two pieces of timber together, and then we'll look at the frame. So that's basically our task. Now there's lots of different ways of doing this. This is the way I find quite simple, quite easy, considering I've got limited number of tools and a limited number of techniques that I can use. So we've come up with a couple of different ones that put things together. So our first thing is we're going to domino these two pieces of timber together. Well, before I do that, what I've done here is I've marked it to say those two pieces to go together, and the reason I did that is because you can see the grain lines in the timber and they sort of fit together, and once we put that together you won't see that in the middle. It'll just blend in with the rest of the grain lines that we have on the timber. The timber's quite pretty. If I turned it over, I could probably use the other side as well, so that one may even become the same side. I've got grain pattern here, grain pattern there. It'll look quite nice. Now the thing about putting two pieces together here that are not actually completely quarter sawn, you need to have them on the opposites. You can see that my grain runs this way here and it runs that way there. It basically gives you a bit more support, and it stops a bit of the warping if you're going to get that in the piece of timber. So try that, see how you go, and you can see we've got the lines there. So we're going to, what we have to do is we have to cut a nice clean edge. Now what I could do is I could go and set it in the vise. I could pick up my trusty plane and I could take it along and I could plane the surface until I've got a perfectly flat surface. If you're not skilled enough to be able to do that well without wasting lots of timber, here's another way of doing it. So I'll make sure I'll keep my lines showing. Use your track saw. Now I've got a really good track saw, and so this is what we're going to do. I put my track on. Now I'm only taking off a fingernail thickness, really, and that's all I need to take off. So it's not very much at all. My board's wide enough to be able to take a little bit more off if I wish to. So I have my two pieces there. Just got to make sure I get that in a position where I can clamp it. Now, I do notice people sitting their track on the timber and then just going straight ahead and cutting without putting any clamps on. I like to have things stable. So I'm going to clamp, not only am I clamping my material to, or the fence, the track to my piece of timber, but I'm clamping the piece of timber to the table as well. I'm not too concerned about it not being square. It can always be trued up later. I'm more concerned about getting a nice clean edge. Now, last time I tried to use this, the battery was flat. I've since learned my lesson and made sure that I have everything trued up. Now, the blade I'm using on my track saw It's the standard blade that comes with the track saw. There's nothing fancy. I haven't gone and bought any fancy extra ones or anything like that. It's just a really good blade on the saw. And so let's have a little cut. So ears on, everybody. And so, as you can see, we have this beautiful clean cut. Now, just take it off, put the other one on. So you can see now that it's just this spectacularly clean cut, and I've only trimmed off the tiniest little amount, so it looks really nice. So swap him over, put the track back on. Same thing, just the smallest amount, don't need a lot. Pretty easy. I haven't pulled it down really tight, I've just put it there enough to hold it. Back on. So, ears on, everybody. That track saw is one of the nicest tools I have in my workshop. When it comes to this sort of thing. Okay, so I don't need these anymore. So when I put my two pieces of timber together, you can see that the join is almost invisible, and it's once I clamp that up and glue that up and give it a little sand, you can see that where I've got this squeezed together nice and tight, you can hardly see where the join is. So it'll take a little bit of pressure to pull it together, but that once I've done that, it'll be perfect. But now what we need to do is domino the thing together. So we're going to domino together with 3 dominoes. Dominoes I'm using are 8x50s. So we'll put 3 of those in there, and then we'll glue and clamp that together. So that's our next task. Mark where I want my dominoes. Grab myself a ruler. Now I want one in the middle. It's a usual story. What have we got here? 390. There, and I might put the other one about, let's say, 70mm in from the end. Make a ruler and a square. having them perfectly in accurate, it really isn't an issue. It doesn't have to be perfect, just close enough so that we've got, it's sort of an even spacing between all of our dominoes.
Cole, Skip asked, isn't there a Bluetooth capability so the extractor activates with the saw turning on?
Yes, Skip, there is, but I don't have one. So I haven't gone through that with my saw, but anyway,
It doesn't come on.
Doesn't matter really. I've got a switch right here, so it doesn't matter to me whether I've got it or not. I like to do everything practically. So, and I know Dave's got one, but he spends more time fiddling around with tectonics than I do. So, anyway. Now, dominoes. Incidentally, if ever you see on the market a little square that looks a bit like this, this is a Cole Clinton special, right? It's a small 4-inch square and a really, really nice little square. And it has, I don't know if you can see on there, it has a little logo. You can see that little logo. Really cool logo on the side of his squares. The thing about them is that they're adjustable by adjusting a couple of screws in the bottom of the square. Probably the bee's knees, or one of the bee's knees about classy tools. Beautiful square, especially if you do a lot of work with one. Okay, dominoes. What I need to do is clamp that to my bench. What I could do is just do the whole lot in one go, so if I clamp both pieces of timber to my benches.
That's a good idea.
I can do all the whole lot in one go. Might put it over on this bench here. And now it's just a matter of setting up my domino.
This is the go-to box for everything.
Pretty right there, Patty. Every time I need something that's got to be incidentally, I've set this, or already set this up to the right size. Takes a little bit of a fiddle to get it all sorted. Now the important thing to remember is we want to be as close as we can be into the middle of our piece of timber here. So I need to measure the piece of timber, just check to see that I've got my domino cutter set properly. My timber is 19mm and I have that marking there set on 16, which is actually not enough, so I've got to come up to 20 at least. Push that forward onto 20, got that back down, lock it into place, and we're ready to go. My depth, I've got the depth set here at 25mm. These are 50mm, so it's half the depth of that. So if I put half into this and half into that one, I'm going to get the right depth. The blade that I'm using, if I pull it out, I don't know if you can see it in there, you can see there's an 8mm cutter in there. So we have that set, and I've set it on the top here. I've set the setting at the top here is exactly the same as the setting of that. Sometimes what you'll find is that people will use, your first setting will be this one here, which is the actual size of your domino, and this one here is a little bit wider, so it gives you a little bit of freedom to move the board back and forth. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do all of mine in the exact size I need them, because I've been practiced at it. So I have everything turned on. A little clip. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my earmuffs on because this is a little bit noisy. So ears on, everybody. Okay, so now it's just a matter of gluing that and clamping that together. So they're going to go together like that. So the first thing you do is set yourself up some clamps. One of the things that I was taught many years ago, to make sure everything's prepared before you actually start trying to clamp things together. So making sure that everything's going to fit. Nothing worse than having something glue in it and you need to put a clamp on it and you haven't got the clamp set up. As you can see, these basic clamps are just the B's and E's. Out there somewhere. So what I will do is I'll put two clamps on here like this, through the two outside ones, and then I will clamp those two pieces of timber to the rails of the clamp. So that will make it nice and flat. There. I think we're pretty right there. Okay, glue. What's going on here? And not going to overdo it. I just wanted to, don't want too much squeeze out. See. brush. Swirl around inside the cavity where we're going to put the dominoes. Looking pretty good. So I might put the dominoes in there now. If you look at the dominoes, I'll bring it up closely so Penny can see it. Just let me get a standing knife first. If you look at the dominoes, these commercially bought dominoes have an edge on them. You can see that edge there. If you want to peel it off, it's quite easy to peel it off. It makes it easier to fit it. You can do that just with a sandpaper or just peel it off like that. I actually leave it on there for the softer timbers because it gives a little bit more pressure to hold the thing in place. So if you're using hardwoods, you find that sometimes they're a little difficult to actually put in, unless of course you expand your joint by using position 2 on your domino cutter. Make sure you cover the whole surface when you put your glue on there. Don't want any little gaps or anything like that occurring. Might be easier to do it this way. Piece of scrap. Now that I've got it pretty close, squeeze it up with the crap. Okay, so we're not quite in there yet. We'll be in a second. I'm going to squeeze it up. You can see the squeeze out happening there. Don't want too much of that happening. Now what I want to do while I've got it upside down is I want to cramp loosen off a little bit. Cramp my timber to the rail. The rails are generally pretty tight, so looking good. Somebody said to me, you can never have too many cramps. I think it's something that pops up every time we use a whole heap of clamps. looking good. Turn them around. A few more of these. Test it, check it, see if it's flat. It looks flat. I have a ruler here. It's pretty much perfect. When you look across there, the ruler is flat on the whole surface, so that's really good. That's what we're looking for. Just do up my end clamps. And I'll put that aside to just put that up here, out of the way. Okay, make sure no glue on my bench. Get rid of that task. Good. Alright, next bit, the frame. Now the frame was, as I said to you before, it's going to be similar to our boxes. And when you look at one of our boxes, you can see we have a frame around the outside, we have an internal inlay, and I have the butterflies on the corners. We're going to have the same sort of top on our table. Now, which brings up a point, and this is something that Pam said to me earlier. It's pretty much the same technique that we use when we're building a box. So we've got the big carcass of the box there. It's got a foot on it, so a plinth, and now we're going to put a top on it. So pretty much the same technique. Now this is what it's going to look like. Again, there are a lot of different ways of building a frame and adding inlays. And lots of people say to me, well, why don't you do this, why don't you do that? Okay, that's fine. I've got lots of different ways of doing things. I find I tend to sort of I tend to sort of go towards the things that I find relatively simple to do. So this is what our frame is going to look like. On the inside of the frame, I've got some claret ash. It's white colour. And when you look at it, you can see there is a variation. It's not in your face. It's a sort of very subtle. The colours in the grain on the claret ash have that pinkish colour that comes with cedar. So it sort of matches up. It's going to be something that's really subtle around the inside edge, and so that's going to go all the way around there. So to get my miters so that they're going to work properly and not having to fiddle around with it, what I need to do is I need to join these two pieces together. Now I could use the same technique I just used a moment ago, joining those two pieces of timber together, but I'm not going to do that because I find that eventually does move a little bit if the pressures are released on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tongue and groove this piece into this piece, and then I'm also going to tongue and groove that piece into the frame bit. Okay, so technique that I use on boxes, we'll give it a go on a cabinet as well. So that's what's going to happen. So my first task is to cut myself some rebates in my material here. This material is the same thickness as the material I just joined together, so don't have a problem with it. It's wide so that I can adjust the width of it depending on how big I want the cabinet to be or how much overhang I want on the edge of the cabinet. So it's just a matter of having a little think about it, make it wide enough so that I can adjust things. This material is 25 millimeters. I'm going to cut in 10 millimeters. Hopefully we'll have a 5 millimeter piece there, or maybe more if we wish. We'll have a look at it when the time comes. So it gives me room to adjust the look of the thing. So I've got basically more than I really need, but it'll all be joined exactly nicely and we'll get that sorted. So my first task is to cut my rebates into here. I have to cut 4 pieces of the claret ash, and you can see from one end of the board from one end of the board the other, the colour difference is quite significant. It's quite different, and when you turn them over you can see that there are variations in the colour, so it's not going to be crystal clean. It's going to just blend in nicely, I hope. And I've got enough there to do 4 pieces here, so we'll cut those when we need them. But my first task is to find centre here. This is going to necessitate setting up my dust extractor. So when I find the centre, I generally do this. I'm not too concerned that it's not exact. By using my finger gauge I can get myself a line that tells me where the middle of the board is. So pretty easy to do that. The router bit that I'm going to use to cut that rebate is a 6 millimeter slot cutter. Now you can buy these at Carbatool, sorry. Carbatool make a range of these. We sell a smaller version. If this is all you've got, if you only have the smaller version, which is the one we sell in our kits, that's a 3.2. This is 6 millimeters. I need a fairly decent rebate in there. You can use this by just adjusting the height or turning your board over in the process, and I'll show you how that happens anyways, because I'll be doing a little bit of that on here. So let's get started on that. So I just need to set up. Now when I use this, you can see there's no bearing on the top of it. So I'm going to have to use a fence. Now our fence is specifically made for this router bit, and I've got it marked 4 to 6 mil slot cutter. When we turn it over, you can see in the bottom of it, you can see I've got a rebate cut in the bottom of it, which is for the shaft of the router bit, and then the slot of course is for the larger section of it. So how that works, we stick that onto here. I'm just getting it pretty close to the adjusted height. I'm getting a signal that my voice is croaky, I need to have a drink. It's tea. It's tea. Dave Stanton has coffee, I have tea. Okay. I've got that set up there. I have a problem here. I may have to turn my table around because my dust extractor won't reach to here.
Okay, let's work with it.
So bring the table here. Bit of furniture removal here. I'll give it a try and see if my dust extractor fits there. do.
This is the elephant in the room.
Yes. Okay, and so I'm going to be working here, and I'm just going to cut my trenches through that way. Okay, let's see how we go with that. So now I need a clamp. Need to adjust that to 10mm. I should be using my LARK tool, but I didn't get it out. So I want 10mm of depth. Getting my earmuffs. I've got everything turned on. Now, Derek LARK made me these little bit handles, and they were a copy of that little push block that I made some time ago. So he's made me up some cute little handles, and I've put a big flat base on it. But I've also made one up with a very thin blade. Okay, so it's got a very thin base, which is really good for pieces of material this thin, this wide. So we'll use that. Okay, now I've got to work. I'm back and forth here all over the place at the moment.
Focus.
I just have to figure out which edges I'm going to cut and which bits I want looking up. That's an outside, that's an inside. My pencil. So I have to cut this edge. What I'm looking for is any faults that I could remove from the outside edges. That's going to be on the inside. That'll be down. You can see there's quite a lot of grain pattern there, so I might have to match that up with this piece here. And that's like that. So we have grain pattern top and bottom. So it's going to look like that, and you've got this lovely grain either side. It's quite nice. So that edge, that edge, that edge, and that edge. So, Pammy, if you just want to go and turn that dust extractor on, we'll get started. So, we'll get the dust extractor going. Okay. Dust extractor didn't do such a bad job. Anyhow, we have our 4 trenches, rebates. I'm going to bring the table back to where it was.
Change cameras.
Got a little bit of dust around, and it's coughing. So it's yeah, something we've got to work on a little bit more, I think. Okay, now what I need to do here is cut the tongue on this piece of material here. So it's just going to be, I'm going to use my tenon cutter. This one will be a little easier than that task I had there. Now when I cut this, I'm going to rearrange the furniture again, I think. Give myself a little bit more space. When I cut this one, I'm just going to be working on this side of the fence, which will be quite easy, and the dusty will sit on there. And we're just going to run that over the edge of our cutter. But I need to get something that's going to fit pretty much spot on perfect. So what I have to do is I'm going to cut myself a piece of scrap. Oh, actually I've got a piece here. This is the same thickness. I'm going to cut myself a little trench just to test, to make sure that I get it right when I cut it. So what I need to do is, first of all, is to measure how much I've got to cut. That's 6 millimeters, and the 6 millimeters is from the outside edge to the inside edge. The other side will be the same, because you saw me turn the timber over so that rebate is in exactly the right size, the right space, exactly the right centre. So that's 6 mil, that's 6 mil. Okay, so plenty of surface for gluing. So I've got to set the height of that 6 mil. This is where my LARK tool comes in handy. Set my LARK tool at 6 mil. This version is really good. It's got a little lock on it, so I can hold it up there. It's just a matter of getting it adjusted. Set that on top of there and just drop it down.
Takes all the guesswork out of it, doesn't it?
Yeah. So there you go. Let's check that. 6 mil. And my depth. And I check the depth. Slide that in. I've got exactly 10 millimeters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the depth at 9.5 millimeters, and that'll give me a little bit of space for movement. Nice having that extra bit of space there. the fence. Might need to bring the camera around this side too.
Okay.
Okay, so 9.5 millimetres. Okay, just swap over to the other camera and turn the extractor on. Sitting up for some reason or other, I don't know why, but a little bit of tape on it. Hold it down. Okay. Can you see what's happening over there?
Camera. Thank you.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut ears on, everybody. There's my tongue. Too loose. Okay, so I'm taking too much material off. So I need to drop it down a little. Try again. So here's the other side of the board. So ears on. Too tight. Wrap it on a bit. So I now have that perfect fit. It's not loose at all. It might look loose, but it's not. It's actually got no movement whatsoever. This side here is way too loose because there's plenty of movement in there. So that's exactly what I want. So my first task now, my next task is to cut through and put a rebate on the outside edges of here. So I think the first thing I need to do is cut myself some more timber so I can do a whole lot in one go. One piece there. don't see me do very often, using a hand tool. Could go to the drop saw and just cut them off in the drop saw. Occasionally I like to work with the nice fancy tools that I've purchased over the years. The Japanese pull saws are so good for this small little tasks like that. Okay, so I'm going to run that through there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as my push stick, so that keeps my fingers away from there, and I have my push block that I can use over the top. So here's one, everybody. So what I'm going to do now, we've run out of time, so during the week I'll cut the rest of these, but as you can see I can now fit my board together, and I've actually widened the board quite nicely, and all I need to do now is just glue that in place. And if you look carefully, you can see that there is the tiniest little gap to allow for expansion at the end of the tongue that I've cut. I've got that voice thing happening again. So there's a tiny little bit of a gap there, so expansion can happen. I'll just glue those together, and then I'll cut another rebate down the other side to fit into the panel that we built earlier in the show. So that's what will happen. So during the week I'll do all of the boards, and I'll glue them all together, and I'll have them ready next week for fitting to the centre panel. So that's what will happen next week. So that'll be it for today. That's where we'll stop. We've run out of time. So don't forget, if you haven't subscribed already, please do so, and we'll catch you up again next week. So have a good week, everybody, and I will see you all on Sunday. Mother's Day is coming up soon, so that might be one of those days. So have a good week, everybody. I'll see you all later.